No wonder we're called the Wild West.
Gold! Gold! Beautiful gold!
Perth Mint is in the spotlight after a Four Corners investigation uncovered all sorts of dodgy dealings. To understand why this is happening, you need to go back 130 years to this guy. Generations of kids have had their picture taken next to the statue of Paddy Hannon in Kalgoorlie. Paddy, as anyone who can remember grade 4 history knows, discovered gold in Kalgoorlie in 1893. Quickly became clear it wasn't a one-off.
It's always been a pretty loose industry.
Wherever you have gold, you have shysters, or as they are officially called, West Australian mining entrepreneurs.
That's gold, Sherry. Gold!
From Claude de Benali's, a gold financier in the 1930s whose investors did their dough when he went belly up, to Alan Bond, who created the super pit in the 1980s and whose investors did their dough when he went belly up. The problem that Claude, Alan and everyone else in the gold game has always had is it doesn't come out of the ground looking like this. It's usually riddled with impurities and needs to be refined. That's why we have the Perth Mint. It's been refining gold and selling it on behalf of gold miners for 120 years. You probably went on a school excursion to visit it. Flogs $22 billion worth of gold each year, customers in 130 countries. People use it because, unlike its competitors, the Perth Mint is guaranteed by government.
So you should be able to trust it.
You'd think. But a new investigation has confirmed this is still very much the Wild West. Yeah! The Mint is run by a government-owned company called Gold Corporation. It was created in the late 1980s, brainchild of the then Labor government. A government trading enterprise created by Brian Burke, which counted Alan Bond as one of its customers.
God, what could go wrong?
Lots. Not that it was Burke's fault. Gold Corporation has been a successful arm of government. A neat, one-stop shop so Australia's gold miners could concentrate on what they do best: blowing shit up. Last year, the Mint produced 312 tonnes of gold, 247 tonnes of silver, and 14 million coins, medallions and bars. Also stores gold owned by investors. Right now, there's $6 billion worth in its vault.
Exactly.
And some of the owners of that gold are dodgy.
Gold Corp has just one job:
to not allow the Mint, and by extension the government of Western Australia, become complicit in international money laundering.
You're throwing away a gold mine.
Which we've just found out we might be. Not that anyone would tell us about it, because current and former employees can face fines and up to 5 years in jail if they talk out of school.
Someone's talking.
They've revealed we've been selling gold to bikies without proper due diligence. Not that we're suggesting Dane's money isn't from legit sources.
Man, I worked hard. I worked so hard for this.
The Mint bought $200 million worth of gold from a company owned by a bloke jailed for manslaughter. And they've been selling product to the Chinese that's less than pure.
What a shit show for McGowan.
Yeah, have a look at this body language.
I don't know what you're referring to.
Sneakers will sidestep most of this shit because when the scale of impropriety became clear, he quietly transferred ministerial responsibility to Bill Johnson. So now we can blame Bill for power blackouts because he's energy minister, sexual violence on mine sites because he's resources minister, public sector strikes because he's industrial relations minister, riots in jail because he's corrective services minister, and multi-billion-dollar corporate malfeasance because he's the minister in charge of Gold Corporation. Shouldn't have backed Steve Smith in that leadership spill back in 2016, Bill.
Ouch.
I am gonna kill Bill.
Don't worry about bikies. Johnson's got to explain why we're in business with Russian oligarchs. The Mint's been doing deals with an overseas bank whose biggest shareholder is this bloke.
Viktor Vekselberg, a Russian oligarch and billionaire with close ties to Vladimir Putin.
Possible new client for Christian Porter.
Wouldn't be the first angry Russian Christian represents. As a former federal attorney general, Porter is used to giving legal advice to ruthless leaders feared by many. So he's well qualified to represent a Russian billionaire who's tight with Putin. He's taken a gig fighting sanctions imposed on Russia's Oleg Deripaska. The sanctions that prevent Oleg from visiting Australia and restrict what assets he can own here were imposed by Porter's one-time cabinet colleague Maurice Payne after Russia invaded Ukraine. We thought it was bad when Porter represented a gun thief. Now he's looking after a bloke who's mates with someone who's inflicted misery on millions of people.
You referring to Putin or Philip Lowe?
The RBA governor has cemented his status as a Nigel no-mates after delivering yet another rate rise. Lowe reckons inflation has peaked, but that's not good enough, it's got to come down. There are two schools of thought about what happens next. The first is he and other central bank heads will keep raising rates regardless of the impact on household finances. Westpac economist Bill Evans is in that camp, reckons reserve banks fear inflation more than widespread mortgage defaults.
Both those options suck.
The competing school of thought is that the banks will inevitably blink and stop the rate rises.
There it is. Stare down.
Economist Nouriel Roubini reckons when businesses and households start folding, central banks will see high inflation as the lesser of two evils. They call Roubini Dr. Doom because he's always predicting disaster. The problem is, sometimes he's right. He called the GFC 2 years before it happened after he analysed toxic debt in the US housing market.
You're saying that at 8% the bonds fail and we are already at 4%?
That's right.
If they go to 8, it's Armageddon.
Yeah, that's right.
Roubini reckons there's simply too much debt in the world for interest rates to keep rising. He added up all the outstanding loans owed by governments and private companies and you and me on our mortgages and credit cards and more credit cards. And he came to $443 trillion. That's nearly half a... What comes after trillion?
I don't know. It's a lot of gold, though.
24 karat solid gold. I'm rich. I'm rich.
I'm Ben Harvey.
That's confidence. That's confidence. That's confidence. Once you know what you're doing, there's nothing stopping you. To take on the market with confidence, watch Trading Up, your daily finance update at thewest.com.au.